Hey everyone, welcome to another Screenwriting Tips. I'm Tony D, and this is Joan of Arc, my little Joan. Today we're going to talk about where do you get your inspirational ideas for your screenplays or any writing really. As you can see, I fixed my tripod, at least for now. I think eventually I'm going to need a new tripod, whole new setup, maybe some lights. The lighting's never very good, I know, but these are very low budget. Okay, so where do you get your inspiration? Well, I get asked that all the time, and it's interesting to note that I've been watching a lot of videos online about the nature of creativity, and apparently this study suggests that there are literally creative people and not creative people. Now, there's nothing wrong with people who aren't creative. But they can't be taught what creative people do, no matter how much you teach them, which has been a frustration with me over the course of my client work, because I was under the misguided impression you could teach some of that creativity. But apparently you really can't, at least according to studies and psychologists. So if you're dealing with a client who's not creative, like most people, he thinks he is or she thinks she is. And it doesn't mean they're not smart. It doesn't mean they can't be innovative in their particular area. So for instance, I've met plenty of money guys, and those guys, they hustle. And they're creative in the money end of things. You know, they know how to hustle and get people to give them money. And that's a skill I wish I had. And you could call that creative in its own way. But, you know, when it comes to writing a movie, knowing what's inside a movie, they're just absolutely clueless. And they'll you know, they might have some ideas. And now that doesn't mean a non-creative person can't have ideas. They can, and they do. And some of those ideas are awesome. But they have limited use. And sometimes they're awesome ideas that don't belong in the screenplay you're writing. So one guy who I think is creative in a very specific way, but not in another way, and I mean no disrespect to him, I'm a fan, but in the world of comics, his name's Todd McFarlane. Now, Todd McFarlane is a really creative guy when it comes to art. You know, whatever you think about his artwork, it's cool. He's done different things with it. He's definitely a great toy designer and character designer, and he has really good ideas. But Todd is not a writer. He once said in an interview that he could take the pages from his comic Spawn, and, you know, after he drew 22 pages of it, he could literally mix them up and just write the story that way. That's, to me, not a guy who really understands the writing end of comics. I mean, he understands it up to a point. I mean, he could certainly put together a comic, but he is not at the level his art is. You understand what I'm saying? So, yes, his artwork's spectacular. I couldn't draw anything close to what Todd McFarlane could do, but I could write circles around him. And so could a lot of writers. And that's not a dig against him. He's got great ideas. Some of the ideas in Spawn are amazing. But, unfortunately, some of those ideas got dropped by the wayside during the course of the comic because Todd kind of doesn't know what's good and what's not, and he's just sort of trying different things, in my view. That's just my opinion, and again, I mean no disrespect to the man. I'm a huge fan, but I see his work and it kind of just jumps from one thing to the other, and that's my take on it, being on the outside. So you may be dealing with people like that. You may be dealing with guys who, you know, I've dealt with producers. They're good guys, for as good as producers are. they're just like anybody else, and they have ideas, and some of them are good, but they don't know which ones are good, how good they are, and what belongs in the movie. So they kind of just, when they hear ideas and think they're good, they kind of just say, oh yeah, throw that into, throw that into, throw that into. And part of your creative process is recognizing what's good and where it belongs. You may come up with a great comedy bit, right? And that comedy bit may be great in a comedy, but it may be a disaster in, say, a crime drama, or it may be great in a crime drama, but the tone of it in a crime drama might have to change a little bit, right? So I've written a lot of mafia stuff, and sometimes you'll get this really funny suggestion for a comedy bit because the mafia guys are very rambunctious and they tend to do funny things, but you can't go too far with that, because at some level, if you go too far, it undermines the seriousness of what they do. It undermines the darkness. And you can't undermine that too much, or else the audience starts to go, wait a minute, is this movie a comedy or is it a mafia movie? So you have to be wary of that. So how do you get inspired, assuming you're a creative person? Well, and you may be out there thinking, oh God, I'm not a creative person at all. You might be. You might be. Now, part of what creative people do is they have to try different things. They have to shake things up. So if I'm in a kind of a rut, one of the things I try to do, I look at it as input and output, right? So my output is my writing, my input is experiences. So sometimes if I'm feeling like I need more input, I'll read books, I'll go out and do something maybe I haven't done before, I'll try to go experience something. One of the things I like to do, I like to go to restaurants. So one of the big things on my list is going to a different restaurant, especially if it's a different type of food I've never had before. That to me is exciting, gives me, some measure of excitement. Because I'm a freelancer, I take different jobs. So writing different kinds of things. Recently, I just wrote some cards for a greeting card company. And that was very exciting. It was different for me. I never had written greeting cards, and I actually sold a couple, and I'm going to write some more and pitch some more, so I'm very excited about that. It's actually very hard, by the way. It seems easy if you write comedy, but then you sit down and go, oh man, this is kind of tough. But doing that different thing gives you a different perspective. So if you're a very regimented person and you don't like to go outside your comfort zone, that can hurt you. That can hurt you creatively. So you need to go outside your comfort zone. One of my little tests when I'm sitting at a comic book convention and people always ask me different questions, one of the things they'll ask me is, where do you get your ideas? And I will say jokingly, I use a service called the Idea Factory in Camden, New Jersey, and if you send them $19.95, they'll send you an envelope with all kinds of great ideas. And sometimes people will look at me and go, really? And those to me are people who, they're really not creative. They have no idea about the creative process. So the fact that I described that scenario kind of makes sense to them. Like, oh, is that where people get their ideas? They send away for them? They pay for them? If you've never been in a creative process, you might think that is a legitimate thing. If you've done it, then you would laugh and go, no, you don't do that. One of the things that inspires me and generates a lot of ideas for me is doing improv. Now, I actually haven't done it in a while for various reasons, because I just don't have the time to go to rehearsal. But I have a lot of the skills, so mentally I'll do the exercises in my head. And what improv teaches you is to generate ideas and throw them away very quickly. Because when you're in a scene, you have to just keep talking without thinking, and it causes you to say and do things in the scene that is just generating the comedy, so you're not worried about you know, how you look or being self-conscious. It teaches you to be very fearless on stage. So one of my recommendations for people is, if they're looking to generate ideas, is to definitely take some improv courses. Even if you don't really do a lot of it. And I got into the improv scene for a good 15 years. I was directing and performing. You know, even if you don't do it that long, just having the classes will really teach you some skills in terms of idea generation that can really help your writing. And one of the things I always do, and it connects in with improv, is I read aloud my scenes. Also read aloud my novels and you know, other stories. It really helps kind of the pacing, and it helps me understand how things might be delivered. And when you understand how dialogue might be delivered, you might also generate some ideas in terms of the status between characters. Because a lot of times in a scene, the status between characters will change. And what I mean by status is not like military ranks, let's say, but which character has kind of the upper hand, right? So you may be in a playful conversation with your friend or your significant other or just a friend, and you may go back and forth with you know, faux insults or teasing, and during the course of that, you may dig a little bit at your friend about something they did in the past, right? And that may cause them to laugh, and you sort of got a slightly higher status because you've kind of like torn them down a little bit in a playful way. I'm not talking anything mean. But then your friend may come back at you and remind you about something. Maybe it's a past X or something, and then the status shifts, like, oh, you got me, kind of thing. That's what I mean by status. So in a conversation, the status may shift, and that's often fun to watch in a scene, especially if, for instance, there's a great show on NBC. I haven't watched it in a while. I should binge watch the episodes I missed, but it's called Superstore, and it's made by some of the guys who worked in The Office, and it's shot in kind of an office sort of type of way. And the great thing about it, it's kind of like The Office, only it takes place in like a Walmart type store. And during the course of that, one of the characters, who's like she's like a floor manager, she's like a mid-level manager, she's, you know, kind of like the head worker. She's not the boss, but she's generally the person who always knows what to do. So her status is extremely high. But within the store, the actual store itself, she's not the boss. There are other people above her, which is the cause for conflict in a lot of the episodes, because she, you know, the bosses on high from corporate come down with this stupid idea, which then she has to implement, and meanwhile she also has to keep the workers underneath her happy, but also sort of tell management, this is a dumb idea, we got to get out of this. So the management above her can kind of like work the system so they could maybe either do it in such a way that doesn't really disrupt things, or get corporate to realize, hey, this is a dumb idea for a completely different reason, and they stop. So that's the way status can affect things. So by doing scenes in improv, you can generate ideas in terms of that detail, that statusy stuff. And even just by reading the dialogue and imagining it in your head and how the scene might play out, you generate stuff like that. Because one of the goals in improv is to heighten, right? So if one thing happens early in the scene, you want it to happen again, and if it definitely happens twice, it has to happen a third time. And each time it gets a little bigger, it's heightened, no matter what. You know, it may inconvenience the other characters. You may have to think a minute to think of why this is happening, but that's what you want to do in a scene. You want to heighten. So when you're writing a scene and you kind of don't know where to go with it, that's the thing you want to do. You want to look at what you've written and say, what has happened so far, and what part of this can I heighten? It might be the emotion, right? It might be, the character's getting mad, make them madder, see where it goes. If the character is getting, let's say, disrupted by other people who keep walking in and offering up more ridiculous things, do more of that until it leads somewhere. Maybe by recognizing the patterns in your own work after you've generated them, you'll begin to see where the patterns can take you, because that's another important skill in improv, looking at patterns. And if you don't have a pattern, try creating one. So look at the first scene you wrote with the character, pick out a trait or a thing they've done, and try doing it again, only a little bigger this time. So if you have a character, maybe they have a drink. I mean, one of my favorite shows is Trailer Park Boys, and one of the great things, character traits with Julian, is that he always has a rum and coke in his hand. Like, no matter where they go, Julian takes his rum and coke with him. So like they'll get into a car and Julian will put his rum and coke on the dash. And wherever they are, Julian either somehow gets a new drink, makes a new drink, or takes the drink he has with him. And that causes problems along the way. So, it's funny to watch him get out of a car at a completely different location. He'll be at a store and Julian will still have his drink and he'll still talk like, it's perfectly normal to take a rum and coke wherever you go. So that's one of the things you can do. And they've just, at this point, the show's in its, I think, 11th season, and they've heightened that about as far as it could go. But, they still do it. Julian, every once in a while, they'll make mention of it. It'll become a problem if Julian has to do something with two hands. Where does he put the drink? Does he attempt to hold the drink while doing something with two hands? It's very funny. So generating ideas is something, even as a creative person, you need to do. So if you're not generating ideas, you're kind of stumped, you got writer's block or whatever, the first thing you need to do is get out of your comfort zone, shake things up a bit. And, sometimes when I'm that way, and it's rare for me, what usually happens to me is I don't really get into a block. I get into a rut where I'm kind of writing the same things over and over. I'm still writing, but if it starts to feel the same or feels too much like work, I mean, writing's work, but it also needs to be fun at a certain level. So if it starts feeling too much like work, if it gets too monotonous, that's when I'll go out. Even just going out generates something for me because I'm not at home writing. And when I'm out doing stuff, I immediately start processing whatever I'm doing outside the house, and then that generates ideas, and then I start thinking, oh, this is a good idea. Damn, I should be home writing. So just getting out of the house is definitely going to help you. Exercise is a good thing. If you're feeling good and feeling energized, you'll tend to be in a better mindset for generating ideas. So definitely feel good, eat good, take care of yourself. There's an old meme about writers that drink and smoke, and that's true to a degree. I mean, I don't drink and smoke. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke, but I drink iced tea all day. Like, that's my thing. Other writers, I mean, you're sitting there for hours and hours, so that's what you do. You'll have something, a drink or whatever. So, I mean, part of that gets into my writing in that I have a lot of characters in my writing that drink iced tea and don't drink. Part of that is I don't really understand drinking like people who drink all the time do. So to write characters who drink a lot is harder for me because I don't know all the little details about ordering a drink, getting a drink, enjoying a drink, the different liquors and that kind of thing. It's not my world, so I tend to shy away from it because, again, write what you know. But sometimes I'll go out maybe I'll have one drink and I'll explore that world a little bit, and it might generate some ideas for me. So basically what I'm saying is get some input. If you're stuck on ideas, get some input. Think on things. Do some things. Read some things. Go out and do everything but write. But then come back and try to process that. Process that like a writer, and think on things. Like, for instance, just recently I was looking for an extra gig just to make some money on the side, and I've been training as a dog walker. Didn't work out for me, but it gave me ideas. So already I'm thinking of ideas for screenplays or stories about dog walkers, because it's a hot new thing. Everybody's doing it. I've got a little of the details of what's involved, and now I can probably knock out a screenplay or some kind, at least a short story about a dog walker. Got all kinds of ideas. So get out of your comfort zone. It's pretty common sense advice. And if you haven't taken improv, take some. Beyond that, I would say don't do things that cause you not to generate ideas. So, getting drunk, getting high, those things don't help you. They don't. Now, you might say, well, get out of my comfort zone. Yeah, if you've never done it before, maybe. But the problem with those solutions is you may not remember everything. Your head's all messed up. You might be having a little too much fun, if you know what I mean. If you're having too much fun, it kind of takes away from things. Getting sucked into doing relationship stuff. Some of that stuff's great. If you get sucked into anything too deeply, it's going to distract you from writing. You got to do it and do different things, like you're trying different food. Go out, taste it, experience it, then come home and process it. That's, take notes. Like this dog walker thing, in a couple months it'll be out of my head if I don't remember it. But I usually, sort of file these things in my brain. But if you're not like me, if you're not constantly generating ideas, I mean, I'm doing it because I'm freelancing, I'm constantly writing stuff. But if you're not, you need to write this shit down. Write it down. Write a bunch of lists of traits and things that was interesting about your new experience. For me, as a dog walker trainee, I learned about new collars, how to walk the dogs, how people just let you into their home to, walk their dogs, and you got access to everything. How even people who work at rescue shelters really didn't know all the things about the dog walking, which was interesting. And some of the customers who were very like me, they love their dogs. They love the dogs so much, and yet they kind of do things that the dog walkers go, well, you shouldn't be doing that. So, one customer in particular, the dog walker was criticizing her choice of food, and this person really loved her dogs and spent a lot of money on her dogs. So it wasn't like she couldn't afford better dog food for them. And I said to the dog walker, well, why don't you mention to her that she should be buying better food? And she was like, well, it's not my place, which I thought was sad. Like, if I wasn't feeding my dog good food, and a professional, dog walker, I mean, they're a professional in the animal kingdom, they should, mention it to me. I would be appreciative of that mention. Like, hey, you should feed your dog better food, and here's a list of food, you can feed your dog. Anyhow, I digress. So, like a lot of creative people, we tend to be scatterbrained and we go off on different tangents as we explore stuff mentally. That's what you should be doing. So be like me. And if you're not, hey, it's okay. That's why I am also a ghostwriter. If you need something written, hey, contact me here through BitChute or YouTube. You can track me down at Patreon, the Webcomic Factory, or Superfat, my webcomics. and I'll happily work something out with you, and maybe I can help you write your story. Maybe I could write the story for you, and you could take all the credit if you'd like. Cost some money, but hey, that's what ghostwriting is. Or maybe I could teach you. If you want to learn, I can't teach you to be creative. Either you're going to be creative or you're not, but you may have it in you. Got to bring it out though, and you got to want to do it. You got to really want to be creative. It's not easy. If it is fun, it feels funner than it is, and it feels less work than it is. But there's a reason why they say artists suffer, because we do. And we suffer for our craft because it ain't easy. All right, that's it for idea generation. My name is Tony D, and we'll see you next time on Screenwriting Tips.